There's something undeniably eerie about coincidences. You think of a friend you haven't heard from in years, and suddenly, they call. You're walking down the street and hear a stranger say the exact phrase you were just thinking. These moments often stop us in our tracks, making us question reality and wonder whether there's more at play than simple chance. But is it all random? Or is there a deeper pattern we're sensing, something that gives rise to that mysterious feeling of meant to be? For centuries, people have turned to religion, mysticism, and fate to explain coincidences. In literature and cinema, serendipitous encounters fuel love stories and hero journeys alike. And in everyday life, a timely coincidence can feel like a cosmic wink, an invisible thread pulling events together with uncanny precision. But science has its own lens through which to view these moments. From probability theory to neuroscience, researchers are trying to decode the hidden logic behind these seemingly magical occurrences. This video explores the intersection of mathematics, psychology, and even quantum mechanics to understand why coincidences happen and why they feel so profound. We'll unravel how your brain processes randomness, what patterns really mean, and why humans are wired to find significance in the strangest connections. Along the way, we'll ask, are these events truly meaningless? Or are they telling us something we haven't yet figured out how to interpret? What counts as a coincidence? Before we can explore the science behind coincidences, we need to define what a coincidence actually is. In the simplest terms, a coincidence is the occurrence of two or more events that appear to be meaningfully related but have no discernible causal connection. Think of running into a childhood friend at an airport thousands of miles from your hometown. There's no reason you should both be there at that exact moment, and yet, you are. These events feel more than random. They feel orchestrated, even if we can't explain why. Coincidences become even more intriguing when they involve emotionally charged elements. Hearing your late grandmother's favorite song just as you're thinking about her. Opening a book to a page that answers the exact question you've been struggling with. These experiences don't just stand out, they feel deeply personal. That sensation, the tug of emotional resonance, is what often gives rise to the belief that everything happens for a reason, even when we know rationally that the universe isn't tailoring its events to our lives. Psychologists distinguish between different types of coincidences. There are passive coincidences, like seeing a familiar face in a crowd, and active ones, where your own actions play a role, like changing your travel plans at the last minute only to avoid a delay. There are also temporal coincidences, where two events align in time, and spatial ones, where they align in place. Categorizing coincidences this way helps researchers study them systematically rather than dismiss them as mere flukes. Interestingly, many of us underestimate how often coincidences should statistically occur. With billions of people on the planet, a massive number of overlapping variables, and infinite moments in time, unexpected connections are not just possible, they're inevitable. The problem is, our brains aren't wired to see it that way. Instead, we treat unlikely events as special and interpret them through a lens of personal significance. This is where psychology and perception begin to color what we call coincidence. Pattern recognition. A survival tool. Our brains are pattern-making machines. From birth, we're trained to identify shapes, rhythms, faces, and routines. This ability isn't just a cognitive quirk, it's a fundamental survival tool. Early humans had to detect threats, recognize edible plants, and anticipate animal behavior. Spotting patterns in nature was the difference between life and death. That legacy lives on in our brains today, even if the world around us has changed. Pattern recognition is deeply rooted in the brain's architecture. The neocortex, especially the temporal lobes, plays a critical role in detecting relationships and similarities. It allows us to learn languages, appreciate music, and even read facial expressions. But sometimes, this system goes too far. It finds order where none exists. That's when a string of unrelated events can start to feel like a message from the universe. This phenomenon is known as apophenia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful connections in unrelated things. Pareidolia, a subset of apophenia, is when we see faces in clouds or animals in rock formations. These are not hallucinations, they're the result of our brains over-applying pattern recognition. When it comes to coincidences, this same instinct leads us to believe that two random events are linked by a hidden cause. Coincidences trigger that pattern detecting circuit in our minds. The more personal or emotional the connection, the more powerful the reaction. A dream about an old friend, followed by an unexpected encounter with them, may be purely statistical, but emotionally, it feels scripted. This tension between logic and feeling is what makes coincidences so captivating, and why we're often drawn to find meaning in them, even when science tells us otherwise. Probability and the law of truly large numbers. Statistically speaking, improbable things happen all the time. One of the key principles that explains this is the law of truly large numbers. It states that with a large enough sample size, even very unlikely events are bound to occur. In a world with nearly 8 billion people, the odds that some pair of strangers will meet under strange circumstances is not just possible, it's guaranteed. Consider the birthday paradox. In a room of just 23 people, there's a 50% chance the two will share the same birthday. Our intuition fails to grasp how quickly probabilities stack up. We expect rare events to stay rare, even when the math tells a different story. That same flaw in reasoning colors how we perceive coincidences. We're surprised by events that are, from a probability perspective, not so surprising at all. Another example is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as the frequency illusion. Once you learn a new word or see a unique car model, you start noticing it everywhere. It's not that it's suddenly appearing more often, your brain is just tuned in. The probability hasn't changed, but your awareness has. That awareness is what primes us to experience more coincidences. Our minds are not natural statisticians. We confuse correlation with causation and underestimate how often patterns should emerge by chance. But when two rare events align, we often perceive it as evidence of fate or destiny. Understanding the law of truly large numbers doesn't remove the emotional charge of a coincidence. It simply explains why these moments happen more often than we think. The brain's need for narrative. Humans are natural storytellers. From ancient myths to modern movies, we rely on narratives to make sense of the world. When coincidences occur, our instinct is to insert them into a larger storyline, one where we are the protagonist, and the universe is leaving clues. This narrative bias helps us process complex emotions and creates a sense of coherence in our lives, especially during uncertainty. This process is driven by what psychologists call the narrative construction of identity. We interpret life events not as isolated incidents but as chapters in an ongoing personal story. Coincidences, especially emotional or dramatic ones, feel like pivotal scenes in that story. When you find out that your partner's parents met in the same city where yours did, or you land your dream job through a random conversation, it doesn't feel random, it feels destined. This desire for meaning is linked to brain activity in the medial prefrontal cortex and posterior cingulate cortex, areas responsible for self-reflection and memory. When a coincidence aligns with our personal goals or values, it lights up these regions, making the experience feel deeply significant. It's not just about the event, it's about how well the event fits into the plot we've built in our minds. Narrative thinking is powerful, but it comes with a cost. It can lead us to see intention where there is none and overlook randomness in favor of emotional storytelling. This doesn't make us irrational, it makes us human. Our need for meaning, connection, and structure often overrides statistical thinking, especially when the moment feels personal. Jung and the concept of synchronicity. In the mid-20th century, psychologist Carl Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity, a theory that would change how many people viewed coincidences. According to Jung, synchronicity is the occurrence of two or more events that are meaningfully related, even though they lack a causal link. He believed these events were tied together by meaning rather than cause and effect, forming a bridge between the inner and outer worlds. Jung shared stories of patients experiencing dreams that aligned perfectly with real-world events. He was fascinated by these meaningful coincidences, and saw them as windows into a deeper reality, one that couldn't be explained by traditional science alone. To Jung, synchronicity wasn't random, it was a sign of the psyche aligning with the universe, a kind of cosmic harmony between thought and matter. His work resonated with many, especially those interested in mysticism, spirituality, and alternative psychology. While mainstream science remains skeptical of synchronicity, Jung's concept offers a language for describing how coincidences feel, even if it doesn't fully explain them. For people searching for purpose, synchronicity validates the emotional experience of a coincidence. It transforms it from a fluke into a message. Modern researchers have tried to examine synchronicity through empirical lenses, but it resists quantification. It lives in the space between statistics and subjectivity, between what can be measured and what can only be felt. Whether or not you accept Jung's view, synchronicity gives voice to the deep human yearning to believe that things happen for us, not just to us. Memory, attention, and selective perception. Our memories are not perfect recordings of reality. They're dynamic, selective, and biased. When we experience a coincidence, we're more likely to remember it vividly, while ignoring all the times when similar events didn't align. This is known as the availability heuristic. We overestimate the importance of things that come to mind easily. Coincidences are sticky in memory. They stand out, they replay, and they feel emotionally charged. That makes them easier to recall and more likely to influence our beliefs. Meanwhile, the countless non-coincidences, those dull, uneventful moments, fade into mental noise. Our attention is naturally drawn to novelty, and coincidences are the ultimate novelty. This is compounded by confirmation bias. If we believe the universe sends us signs, we'll notice and remember the signs that confirm that belief and disregard everything else. A person who sees 11:11 on the clock and makes a wish will keep noticing 11:11, but ignore all the other times that don't feel magical. This selective attention feeds the illusion that coincidences are more frequent than they really are. Understanding how our brains filter information doesn't take away the wonder of coincidences, it just grounds them in psychology. Once we realize how attention, memory, and bias work together, we begin to see how our own minds are the architects of these meant-to-be moments. We're not just receivers of coincidence, we're co-creators of its meaning. Emotional impact and the illusion of control. One reason coincidences are so powerful is the emotional impact they deliver. When a meaningful coincidence occurs, it feels like a moment of clarity, a sign that we're on the right path. This is closely tied to the illusion of control, the comforting idea that we have influence over outcomes that are actually random. Studies have shown that people are more likely to see patterns and significance in events during times of stress, uncertainty, or transition. It's when life feels chaotic that we most crave a sense of order. A coincidence in such moments acts like a beacon, reassuring us that something greater is at work, even if we can't see it. This psychological effect is not just about comfort, it's about agency. When something unexpected aligns in our favor, it feels like we're connected to something larger. Whether it's divine will, karma, fate, or the subconscious mind, we feel empowered by the idea that we're not alone in navigating the world. That illusion of control can reduce anxiety and restore a sense of balance. But it can also be misleading. Relying too heavily on coincidences to guide decisions can lead to magical thinking, where causality is replaced by intuition alone. That's not always a bad thing, especially in creative or spiritual pursuits, but it becomes dangerous when used in place of critical thinking. Recognizing this balance is key. Coincidences can inspire us, but they shouldn't define our decisions. Coincidences in science and discovery. Some of the world's most important scientific breakthroughs began with what seemed like a coincidence. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin because he forgot to clean a petri dish. Wilhelm Röntgen found X-rays while experimenting with cathode rays. These accidents weren't just lucky, they were moments where chance met curiosity and preparation. Psychologist Kevin Dunbar studied how scientists actually make discoveries and found that many breakthroughs come from what he calls anomalous data, unexpected results that researchers often overlook. The ones who pay attention to these coincidences, who ask why something strange happened, are the ones most likely to innovate. It's not just about luck, it's about how we respond to the unexpected. In this way, science embraces coincidences as opportunities. The difference between a missed anomaly and a revolutionary idea often lies in mindset. While the general public may see coincidences as signs from the universe, scientists treat them as clues in a larger puzzle, hints that something deeper is happening beneath the surface. Coincidences, then, are not enemies of science. They're often its origin point. They force us to ask new questions, break old assumptions, and consider possibilities we hadn't imagined. Whether in a lab or a personal moment, the unexpected intersection of unrelated events has the power to shift paradigms, and maybe even history. Coincidences in relationships and love. One of the most emotionally charged areas for coincidences is romance. We love to believe that fate brings people together, that there's one person out there we're destined to meet. Whether it's bumping into a future partner at a coffee shop or discovering you share the same obscure hobby, these coincidences fuel the narrative of meant to be. In dating, the story of how a couple met is often steeped in serendipity. It becomes part of their identity as a pair. Scientists refer to this as romantic destiny belief, the idea that relationships are determined by fate. People with high destiny beliefs are more likely to interpret coincidences as signs they've met the one, which can strengthen their bond early on. But there's a psychological trade-off. If things go wrong, the same people are also more likely to view relationship problems as a sign they weren't meant to be together. In contrast, people who believe in relationship growth, rather than destiny, are more resilient. They treat coincidences as interesting, but not defining. Still, we can't deny the power of chance in shaping love stories. Coincidences give romance a magical quality. They make people feel chosen. And whether that's scientifically accurate or not, it plays a vital role in how we experience connection, chemistry, and the mystery of human intimacy. Are coincidences messages, or just noise? At the end of the day, we're left with a fundamental question. Are coincidences messages from the universe, or just statistical noise filtered through our storytelling brains? The answer may be both. What we call a message may actually be our mind assembling meaning from chaos, and what we call noise may still move us in ways science can't fully explain. Spiritual traditions often interpret coincidences as divine communication, signs from angels, ancestors, or the universe itself. Meanwhile, skeptics see them as the inevitable byproduct of probability. Neither view is entirely wrong. Coincidences exist at the intersection of perception, belief, and mathematics. The key is to recognize that meaning is subjective. A coincidence that feels profound to one person may seem trivial to another. What matters isn't whether it was real, but what it reveals about how we think, what we value, and how we interpret our lives. Coincidences, then, may not be cosmic messages, but they are deeply human ones. They expose the architecture of thought, the emotional scaffolding that shapes how we move through the world. In decoding them, we decode ourselves. Coincidences are strange and powerful. They challenge our understanding of randomness and meaning. Whether they come from pure chance or something deeper, they invite us to pause, reflect, and reconsider the nature of connection. At their core, they ask us to look closer, not just at events, but at our own interpretations. Science teaches us that coincidences are expected, even inevitable. But our emotional minds don't experience them that way. They feel like magic, like whispers from the universe. And perhaps that feeling, the sense that something larger is at work, is part of what makes us human. We are not just observers of coincidence, we are its interpreters. In a world where so much feels disconnected and unpredictable, coincidences offer a strange kind of order. A glimpse of harmony in the noise. Whether you see them as random events, psychological artifacts, or spiritual signs, they carry a message worth listening to. Maybe not about fate, but about how beautifully interconnected our world truly is.